Family courts do not want transparency because they are systemically violating due process rights of individuals all across this nation. They are systemically not informing people that their ability to access higher levels of court in the judiciary, to the appeals court, to state supreme courts, is achieved without a couple of things. Number one, and most importantly, is an accurate record. An accurate record of the process. And this is one of the components that is missing inside our judiciary, especially as it pertains to family law. And in fact, I think, and I would argue, the lack of transparency is what is creating and fostering an environment for which the systemic nature of due process violations can occur. Just this morning, as I broadcast this hearing on my live feed, what I did is I set it up onto my laptop, took my cell phone, went live on my Facebook page, and began observing and commentating on the court hearing that was transpiring. And a couple of things that people were able to see that had no experiences in family court. One of those, the judge would go into a virtual breakout room. They would create a breakout room where they would take normally the attorneys in the case, representing the respondent and petitioner, into these breakout rooms and have private discussions. Again, the critical thought process should formulate the question of, this is a public courtroom, it's a public hearing, so why the need for going into a concealed breakout room where nobody can hear or see what they're discussing? I've never been in one of these, so it's a mystery to me exactly what is said. But if I had to guess, and make an educated guess on what's transpiring, is that the attorneys from each case, along with the judge, are conspiring behind the litigants' backs to maximize litigation, understanding what the resources and assets are of those individuals. They map out a plan to systematically drag out litigation, and they will use this case as far as they can get it until they have not only drained that person's resources, they will drain their savings accounts, their checking accounts, they will drain retirement funds, they will drain college funds, they will max out credit cards. And when this person is at the end of their resources and they have depleted everything in attorney costs and fees, they then reach out to who? They go to our family. They go to their families. They ask their moms or dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters. And why? Why are they so desperate for more money? Because they know that they hang in a critical juncture of being completely pushed out of their children's lives. The most precious component to our nation and the growth of this nation and the success of this nation is relying upon having healthy, well-grounded, well-balanced children that we raise as parents that then transition into adulthood and can be contributing members of our society. Now, how can they do that when we've got 20 million plus American children growing up absent their biological fathers? We have the macro data to support this. We don't have that for mothers. And there's a reason for that. Historically, men have been protectors and providers. Whether you believe in God or nature, whatever your belief system, that is what men have historically and traditionally done, especially in the United States. And that is the predominant reason why this has more adversely affected that community than that of motherhood. But increasingly what we're seeing is the same intrusions into where women are on the same receiving end as which men have been for many years. And what's it do to you? The personal effects and the nuclear fallout from family court is destructive. It is nuclear in nature. You take a nuclear bomb and place it into the nuclear family and set it off. And that is exactly what happens, because when it's all said and done, just like in a case I watched today, they map out the financial resources and then they pursue with vigor depleting those resources under the guise of best interests of the children. An undefined phrase that is extremely subjective and changes from person to person, from judge to judge. We could have 10 judges in this room hearing the same case, and they will come to 10 different conclusions on the best interest of the child. Why? And you, and we have men in here predominantly, minus CJ. He's a buddy of mine. But predominantly as men, what has happened to us is that we're increasingly being driven out of our children's lives. That is not to say that it's not happening to mothers as well. When people find out that I'm a father's rights activist, as they like to label me as, when they get to know me, what they really discover is I'm a parental and children's rights activist, that I seek to expose the true nature of the court systems and what's transpiring. I'm here today to give this session to educate you as to some of the pitfalls of family court and how it is driving the fatherless epidemic in this nation, combined with the failed war on drugs and the welfare state. This is the third piece of domestic policy that nobody's discussing in this nation. And I would argue it's one of the most important pieces that must be elevated in the conversation, because if we don't, what we will continue to see is an increased risk of high school dropouts, leading to greater chances of living in poverty, which also leads to an increased risk of joining gangs, committing violent crime, abusing drugs and alcohol, depression and anxiety, and mental and emotional health disorders amongst our youth. And what happens when that occurs? Once our kids are exhibiting emotional and mental health issues, what's the go-to for the state? What's the first thing that we as a society go to? Pharmaceuticals. Medicate them. I don't know how many, I think the gentlemen that were here earlier, they said that they interviewed Dr. Warren Farrell, and he's kind of a world-renowned researcher and an author about the fatherless epidemic and what's transpiring. And I think that he had written in a book or a recent article, I think he said 26 of the last 28 mass shooters came from fatherless homes. Now, I haven't verified that. I don't know. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. You can look for yourself. But what I do know is that whenever I look at the fallout from the war on drugs, you look at places like South Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, Detroit, all of these major cities that are predominantly controlled by Democrats, in those communities, just like in Chicago, there is ridiculous amounts of violence, of murder, of high school dropouts, of poverty, of welfare use. And we're talking about in the war on drugs. It's failed. It doesn't work. We need to reconsider what we're doing. I'm here to make the same argument with family court, that establishing and making fathers every other weekend visitors to their children is contributing to all of those other issues in other communities, as well as within the black community. And nobody is discussing this, because family law was largely just pushed to the side and ignored. It's, well, John just had a bad day in court. Mary just got screwed over. And we hear, and I would venture to say, if I talk to any of the men in here that I don't really know, that you've either personally experienced it yourself or you know that somebody who has. Millions upon millions of people across this nation are having their lives turned upside down and destroyed. And it's all for money. It is a for-profit industry that is predicated upon using conflict, stoking conflict between the parties. And the most disturbing part is they're using children to do it. Think about the individuals that do things like that. Who in our society, in our world, on a global level, uses children to make money and coerce compliance out of individuals who don't agree? Terrorists do that. The mafia does that. The mob did that. This is legalized domestic terrorism against families in this nation in a ridiculous for-profit industry that if we do not change course rapidly, as we should change course on the war on drugs, our nation is going to experience far more deprivation of rights under color of law, because as we have more citizens grow up with mental, emotional, and behavioral health disorders, it is expanding government. It has rapidly expanded government. If you think about all of the needs from one child who doesn't graduate high school, who then lives in poverty, who gets pregnant as a teenager, who has an abortion, who abuses drugs, who then lives in the black market, who gets arrested, who goes to the prison system, and then they live in this cycle of incarceration and abuse of drugs and self-medication because they're stuck in a loop that they can't get out of. They don't see any end to it. And I understand completely because I live that today. I'm currently living that today. I have been in litigation for 6 long, painful, continuous years, and I have not seen my children in over 2 years. In a free society in which I served this country for 20 years, had a top secret clearance, and by all stereotypes, the clean-cut, white privileged man who has it the best in America. But I've not seen my children in 2 years. And somebody says, that doesn't sound right, Cash. That's not right. A judge wouldn't just take your children. Sure they would. Sure they would. If you do what I did, if you stand up for yourself, if you assert your rights, if you say, you will not do that to me, you will not victimize me and my children, you have broken the law, I can illustrate, Your Honor, that you have broken the law. They know that they do. And one of the most critical pieces that allows them to break the law systemically is that of absolute immunity. It is a higher tier above qualified immunity, which that's one of the buzzwords today because of what happened to the gentleman in Minnesota. In qualified immunity. In qualified immunity for police officers, in qualified immunity for state workers, yet nobody is discussing the absolute immunity, which is at another level to that of qualified immunity. With absolute immunity, the judge enjoys something that nearly no other person on this earth does. They can violate your rights so egregiously that you can't do anything to them. You can, as long as they're sitting on the bench and acting in their official capacity, people think, well, you can just sue the judge. No, you cannot. You can try. Good luck. They know that. Now combine absolute immunity, where they're nearly untouchable. You combine that with no transparency, no audio, no video recordings. See, one of the basic premises of due process is the ability to reach each level of the judiciary. If a court errs in their decision, if they misapply the law inappropriately, if they do it maliciously, it's not captured. A written transcript, that's antiquated. If I was an appeals court judge or a state Supreme Court judge, I don't want to sit down and read and pour through files and files of documents. If I could sit down and watch a video and a video and a video, and I could listen and watch and observe as this judge misapplies the law, and then I get to read their body language, I get to read and watch how they intimidate litigants, I get to understand how they silence litigants' attorneys when that attorney begins to stand up for their client to defend them and assert their rights. I've watched time and again as they're told to shut up. Shut your mouth or I'll haul you off. And this is how they speak to people. Shut your mouth or I'll have my bailiff arrest you and you're going to jail today. Be quiet. Don't say another thing. Now you're paying this individual $350, $400, $600 an hour. They're there in the court. They're there to represent you. You're going to be liable for that bill to pay them. But they can't even speak. They're not even allowed to make the case for their client because the judge has already predetermined, has already outlined that there is a resolution to this case, but the litigants don't know it. They don't know it yet. Oftentimes, there's an undue influence. Oftentimes, there's a prior relationship between the judge when the judge was a previous attorney. And oftentimes, they are working out deals in closed-door sessions without the litigants' knowledge. And so how do we curb these types of behaviors? How do we curb what's happening? It's simple. Right now, there's 2 different phones live streaming me speaking right now. With extreme accuracy, an individual could take what I have said here today and challenge anything and everything that I've said. They can research for themselves anything that I've said. With today's technology, there is no reason that every family law court in this nation should not be live streaming their proceedings, because they're doing it right now. My court in the 19th Judicial Circuit in Lake County, Illinois, had recently built a $100 million addition to their courthouse. Why? Crime's going down. Crime's going down. The argument is we need more space. How much space do you need for one judge? And my judge this morning, Judge Janelle Christensen, sat in her courtroom, in an empty courtroom, by herself. I think her clerk was there. And they live streamed the Zoom proceeding right to YouTube. What is the justification then for a multi-million-dollar addition? They could have applied this and done this a long time ago, but they chose not to. They chose not to because there's a greater risk to what they are really there for, which is creating additional revenue stream for them in the cottage industries that surround family law. I am here as somebody to educate on family law, how detrimental it is to our nation, and to offer, I believe, viable reforms, beginning with transparency, beginning with having the ability to access the appeals court with an accurate record. A clerk or a transcriber in the court who's typing the case in shorthand and then goes back and retypes it up, they are subject to being tired. They are subject to being under the influence. They are subject to undue influence or having an undue relationship with the judges that they spend a great deal of time in the courtrooms with. There are a number of outside influences that we can't control. Whereas with technology, we have police officers wearing body cameras. And rightfully so. They should be wearing body cameras. They shouldn't be able to turn those off. Why in God's name would video come up missing? To the average person, we know. We go, probably did something you shouldn't have. Right? That's what we say. You probably should.
The police officers in Newport News, when they take the body camera off the charger, it turns on, and it does not turn off until it goes back on the charger at the end of the shift.
Right, and it's technology.
That's great technology.
That's great technology. And this could be the same way. There is no reason why these court proceedings, because you're not going to be tainting a jury pool. There's no juries in family law.
And they're public.
What's that?
And they're public.
And they're public. They're public hearings. You get to go in and sit and observe. These aren't closed-door sessions. The protection of the minor children? Yeah, absolutely. We need to protect the minor children. We need to protect their identities. How are they protecting that in a public courtroom? If this was the courtroom right now, and I'm the judge, and I'm discussing minor children, what policies and practices and procedures do I have to abide by as the judge, and do these attorneys have to abide by who are arguing on behalf of their clients? There's a standard and expectation set of them that we protect the identity of minor children. KW, KJ, age 7, in this matter. It's quite simple. I mean, they went to law school, right? Clearly they're intelligent people. You tell me they're not intelligent enough to use initials to protect the identity of these children? They do it every day. So it's not an argument to be made to prevent audio and video broadcasts of these court proceedings. Secondly, abolish absolute immunity. They have to be held accountable. When it can be clearly shown that a judge or any other public official acting in their official capacity has violated state statutes and constitutionally protected rights of citizens, they deserve to be held accountable. End of story. Abolish absolute immunity. On a national level, I believe that we need to shift to a model of a rebuttable presumption. Rebuttable. If you're not familiar with the term, it means you can present some evidence to rebut the equality standard of 50-50. If the other parent was a pedophile, you've got a great argument. If the other parent's in prison, you've got a great argument. If the other parent lives on the other side of the country, you've got a great argument. All which can be proven can be presented to the court and say, Your Honor, this is what I have. I don't believe that the mother of my children should get equal custody because she's in prison right now. Great argument. The other parent lives 6 hours away. The children have been here for 6 years. If I'm the father in the case, and if I've got custody, and the mother then comes and says, I would like equal custody, well, of course it wouldn't work if she's 6 hours away. That's not feasible. But then she has the option to move to where the children are at. And if I'm the dad, if it's me, and mom moves close to me, number one, I understand, I know how hard it is to raise children. I think we probably all do. It's not easy to raise a human being from birth until adulthood. There's a lot of work and sacrifice involved. The best interest of the children is to ensure that they have the maximum amount of time with each parent. And when the relationship is dissolved, yes, that is not the fault of the children. And they will set child support to ensure that the children get to continue to maintain a lifestyle that they enjoyed prior to the dissolution of their relationship. But what about the time? What about the opportunity to be there as a parent and raise your children? Why do the children not enjoy that piece of the relationship? Because had the relationship not dissolved, they would have had equal access to the other parent. Our children deserve the best opportunity in life. And the best opportunity in life for them, when the relationship has broken down, and there's no finding of unfitness by the state, because the state bears the burden of proof of finding that parent unfit. It is not the parent's job to prove themselves to be fit. That is counterintuitive to what our entire justice system is predicated upon, of innocent until proven guilty. But in these courts, they are forcing parents to prove their fitness. They are separating these parents from their children with a very low standard of evidence. Why? That is our most important piece of our nation. That is our future. If we had a room full of children in here, I would argue that if a threat came into this room, that every person in here would seek to defend those children. They would rush to their aid. Your human instincts would kick in, and you would protect those children. We, as adults, would surround those children and shield them from whatever harm that we saw coming towards them. Not just because you're an adult, but because that is your natural instinct as a human being. To move to action. If you heard a baby crying in the hall right now while I'm talking, all of a sudden what I'm saying is irrelevant. It's not important. All ears and eyes will turn to find out what's happening with this baby. If you heard a woman screaming down the hall, you would do the same thing. You would seek to protect your fellow human being. And what's not happening in our country is there are men and women pleading for help. Their children are pleading for help, but those pleas are being acted out through their behaviors, through emotional and mental and behavioral issues that they're experiencing, because a child doesn't understand when they're not seeing their father. They don't know, but they act out on it. The children in these inner city communities whose predominantly fathers are incarcerated in prisons, a lot of what you're seeing is them acting out the behavior because they lack the understanding of what's transpiring in their lives. They don't understand why they don't have a mother there loving and raising them, why mom's working 2 and 3 jobs. They don't understand, why is my dad in prison? They don't understand how the war on drugs facilitated that separation. Just as many children in this nation don't understand how the family law courts are driving a fatherless epidemic in this country, because it is a for-profit industry. So make a rebuttable presumption of 50-50 equal shared parenting the national standard. That runs counterintuitive to what we have done. That's the complete opposite of what our country has done for the last 30, 40 years. This every other weekend model and making one parent a visitor to their children and bankrupting them in the process has to end. And I would venture to say what will then transpire over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years is we will increasingly see a reduction in domestic violence. We will see a reduction in conflict in post-marital issues. It's not hard to get onto Google and to find where a mother killed her children, or a father murdered his ex-wife, or a father put a gun in his mouth and killed himself. Doing this will reduce, I'm going to argue, on a very large scale, it will significantly reduce the amount of suicides in this nation. With over 40,000 people a year committing suicide, predominantly middle-aged white men, who are largely, by all arguments, pretty successful guys. I'll give you one example of this. In McHenry County, Illinois, in 2017, there was a gentleman there who ran a small business, a very successful small business, but it was a family-owned small business. They were very successful. In 2 years, I think that it was, he made over 200 court appearances. Over 200. Their company, their small business, was subpoenaed so many times by his ex-wife and her counsel that they had to hire an attorney full-time just to answer the subpoenas. The man's a pillar in his community. He's a father of 4 beautiful children. He was about 53 years old. And 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, they incarcerate this man after he's already paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in child support and alimony, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They incarcerate him for contempt. The judge uses the contempt powers of the court to coerce this man to comply, to purge yourself of your contempt. They say that you have the keys to your future. That when they incarcerate you, that you in fact have the keys to your freedom. You just merely need to comply. And so if you, sir, if I'm the judge and I say you're in contempt of court, you're going to jail, when you purge yourself of the $10,000 purge I've set for you, you don't get a bail bondsman. You don't get to pay 10% and buy and purchase your freedom. When you're able to use your phone calls through the sheriff's department, and you're able to contact enough people to scrounge up that $10,000 and have it delivered to the court, then you can be set free. In Cook County, Illinois last year, they incarcerated over 1,000 people in the debtor's prisons. Over 1,000. With no right to an attorney, no right to a trial by jury, and no hearing to determine their ability to pay. And with no transcripts, no ability to even access the appeals court. But talk to any attorney in any estate, or in any state, and ask them how much it costs to get to the appeals court. Tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. For the judge in the appeal court, just to remand it back, right back to the same judge it just came from. And what do you think they're going to do after you take them to the appeals court and try to embarrass them? They're not going to play nice with you. And so you, as a person, do what this gentleman did. You're at the end of your rope. He's sitting in jail for 3 weeks in McHenry County, Illinois. And 3 weeks into his incarceration, he kills himself. That is happening all across this country every single day. Because good men and good women are driven to the point of desperation. When it's your children on the line, and they have systematically destroyed your entire life, and it's your children on the line, where do you go? What's the answer? You don't have one. You run out of options. And those people feel they've no longer got a reason to live. Because they feel like, much like what I do. It's been more than 2 years since I've seen my children. 2 years. The average citizen goes, well, hold on a sec, Cash, you're a retired Navy veteran. You held a top secret clearance. You're not prohibited from being around children. You've never been charged or convicted of any crime. Because these are the questions that first formulate in the average person's mind. What did you do? First question out of people's mouth when I tell them that. What did you do? What makes you assume that I did something? That alone should tell you of the bias that exists within our own minds. Because we don't call into question what's happening inside government and the judiciary. We trust that somebody who puts on a black robe and they swear an oath and they went to law school, that they're infallible. And we've given them the protection for them to believe that they're infallible. And they're not. It's because we're human beings and because they're fallible that we need transparency. It's because of that that we need accountability. It's because police officers can do the wrong thing and be corrupt. And judges like the one in Pennsylvania can sell children for profit into a for-profit juvenile detention facility. But it takes something that egregious before they're ever held accountable. There's a Supreme Court case out of the state of Texas. A few years ago, there was a criminal trial unfolding, and I don't remember the case, but the judge ordered the police to go and pick up the criminal defense attorney. Wasn't present for court for whatever reason. He went to go pick him up, or the police went to pick him up, but before the police could bring him back, the judge had ordered the police officers to issue a good old police-style beating to the attorney, to the criminal defense attorney. None of that was disputed. The case goes all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court comes back and says he was acting in his official capacity, he has absolute immunity, case closed. A sitting judge can order the police to go and pick somebody up and beat them up and then drag them in front of the judge, and the judge has absolute immunity, and the highest court in our nation said that that's okay. They didn't defend the actions. They just said there's nothing you can do to them. Now, when the highest court in the free world is saying that, the highest court is saying that, what do you think is transpiring down here? It's an absolute travesty of what's occurring in this nation. I'm a whistleblower. I'm a father. I'm a veteran. I'm a libertarian. I'm a staunch volunteer for a movement of parents that all they want to do is just raise their kids absent any interference from the state. That's it. This is not a 10th Amendment states' rights issue, because a state does not have a right. A government does not have a right. A human being has a right. You have a right to parent your children absent interference from the state unless the state can prove with a clear and convincing standard that you are unfit and an imminent risk to your children. If they cannot do that, then they need to stay the hell out of your business. And the only thing left for them is to ensure that equal protection under the law is upheld and that you as a father or a mother have equal access to raise your children. And you get to make the life choices on whether or not you're going to be involved. For me, if I stayed in the military, having equal custody doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But should I go 2 years in a nation that I served without seeing my children? No, I shouldn't. Nor should any other parent out there. There are more protections afforded for somebody accused of rape and molestation and murder because those go through a criminal court. These do not. They go through a family court. When the accusations levied at you go through a family court, there is no right to an attorney. There is no right to a trial by jury. There is no right to a record so far as what the court believes. And so I am running, and right now, and people will tell you, if you go to my page, you will see from just this morning that I live stream and I commentate on a Zoom court hearing with the very corrupt judge that has refused to void out 2 orders entered by the previous judge, because if she does, she's an associate judge. She's a junior judge. She's appointed by the circuit judges. And if she doesn't play ball in that courthouse, if family law attorneys don't play ball in that courthouse, they're biting the hand that feeds them. And I've seen enough to know that they will cannibalize their own. If they don't play ball, they're going to cannibalize their own. And the only reason I'm still fighting the way that I am, as successfully as I am, the campaign that I'm railing against the judicial system in my own case, is because I've got a pro bono attorney from a different area of law who's experiencing the same exact things I am. He's living it himself. And I asked him, and he said, Cash, I want to represent you, back in 2018. Or I'm sorry, last year, 2019. He says, Cash, I want to represent you. I voted for you when you ran for office. I believe in your message. I believe in what you're doing. And he said, and I want to represent you. And as I began to ask him, and learn more about him, and found out he was going through his own personal case, I asked him, I said, Ted, would you fight as vigorously as what you do for me? And he represents multiple men in Illinois pro bono. I said, would you fight the way that you do if you didn't see it and experience it yourself? He said, absolutely not. I wouldn't have set foot in a family law court. I would have continued on with my life. And he was doing great work in his line of work. He was doing great things. He's working with the Trump administration. He's working with trade deals with China. I mean, he's heavily involved. He's doing good work. But his path, much like mine, has been led down a path of seeing our citizens abused at the hands of government and being morally compelled to do something about it despite the risk. At every turn, I'm threatened with incarceration. At every turn. While withholding my children from me. If they can do that to me, not that I deserve any special treatment for my service, I don't. But we've all sought to try and establish a record for ourselves through our lives and the way that we live, through our principles and values, that we should be able to be parents unless they can prove that we're unfit. So when the delegates, whenever they, I believe Mr. Cole here and either Mr. Abernathy or Mr. Joshua Smith, they're going to make a proposition. I can't do it because I'm here as just an educator. But they're doing a good thing. They're bringing a plank to, or an addendum to 1.6. The Libertarian Party, so far as I know, is the only party that has a party plank on parental rights. That should just serve us greatly as well. That only the third largest party, and I would argue